Canterbury, I'm Mike Yardley. Welcome to NewsMakers, where we debate the week's issues through Canterbury eyes. It's a pleasure to introduce our panel. Outgoing Hurunui Mayor Garry Jackson.
Hi, Mike.
City Councillor Yani Johanson and Orion Chief Executive, also Chairman of ICA, Roger Sutton. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
We will start with the case of Chris Carter and his pressing of the self-destruct button in quite spectacular fashion, don't you think? What a ghastly business this has become. But does this in any way undermine Phil Goff's hold on the leadership, or will the party rally around him? What do you make of it, Garry?
I've got 3 words, I think, for Chris. Dumb, dumber and dumbest. I think it's the dumbest thing I have ever seen in politics in terms of the way he's played it. Cannot understand it. What effect it has on the Labour Party and Phil Goff, don't know. I think in the short term, probably, because what Chris Carter has done is just so crazy. I think Phil Goff will gain some strength from it in terms of his hold on the party. Long term, don't know.
Yani?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it's a very unwise move on Chris Carter's part. I think, for me, when the expenses stuff started to come out, I think from what I saw in the media, Chris certainly didn't appear very well. And I actually feel a little bit sorry for the person, because I think he's obviously under a lot of pressure. He's not handling it, and I think he actually needs to get some help. In terms of the Labour Party, I think that I'm not sure that there's a move to get rid of Phil Goff. I think it's probably just one individual MP that's obviously not feeling well, and I think it should help bring that caucus together if there was any disparity, as Garry said.
Your impressions, Roger?
Well, I think he's gone so far, it's almost not believable. Yeah, I mean, it's almost he's done such an extraordinary thing. It's almost like he is on drugs, or he's suffering serious stress. So, but in terms of the impact on Phil Goff, I think it's actually negative, because I think it's just going to be negative on Labour Party ratings, and I think negative Labour Party ratings is just going to be bad for Phil Goff. I think it'll be hard for them to take the pressure. People will be looking at Chris Carter and going, gee, not so long ago he was a serious member of the executive. Yes. He was running the country, but look at him. And I think it's very, very bad for Labour. I think people will be going, gee, what on earth was this guy doing, having the amount of power he had? Yeah. And the fact he still hasn't ever really stood up and said, look, I really screwed up with the travel stuff and the expenses stuff. I think it just looks really, really bad.
I suppose Chris Carter may have been partly successful in that a lot of New Zealanders are talking about the stability of Phil Goff's leadership, and will he see Labour through to the next election. Phil Goff looked genuinely angry on close-up last night, and for once, I have to say, with Phil having his furrowed brows and looking angry, he looks more like a leader. As part of his problem is he's too nice.
Yeah, I agree, and he did look that way last night. But whether or not that's going to hold through long term, I don't know. So I think they'll get a little. Phil himself may get a little surge of support out of this, but I still think long term it's going to, agreeing with what's also been said, I think it won't be good for the Labour Party long term. They're going to have a long way out of the jungle on this one. Yeah.
Do you think Phil Goff will lead Labour to the next election?
I'm not sure, Mike. I mean, I think it was always going to be a hard road to follow with Helen Clark leaving, and of course Labour being in opposition. I think National, seem to be doing pretty well in the polls. I think it'd be very hard for any leader to challenge that. I have to say, I think Labour's problem is what they need to do is actually differentiate between National a lot more, and that's not coming across, and I think the leader does have to take responsibility for that. There needs to be, I think, more of a contrast between the two parties, and we're not seeing that at the moment. But whether or not there's anyone else suitable and qualified to keep that party together and go into the next election, I'm not sure.
Is Phil Goff the leader by default?
He may be. I mean, when Helen left, they left a very big gap, especially when a whole lot of other, senior people left or said they weren't standing again at the same time. I think Andrew Little is probably going to be the next leader of the Labour Party. I think they'll probably leave things as they are through the election. I think beating National at this stage is going to be really hard. I think they'll let Andrew find his feet in the Labour caucus, and I think he'll be the next leader of the Labour Party within a reasonably short time following the next election. Can
Shane Jones rehabilitate his fortunes?
No, not yet. I mean, he might down the line once he's re-established his mana with everybody, but now it's too fresh, the whole thing, isn't it?
If Winston Peters can come back, I'm sure Shane Jones can.
Well, I think that says more actually about Winston Peters, who votes for Winston Peters, than anything else, though.
Possibly Michael Laws does.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah. Of course, from the government's perspective, one of the key issues this week that they've been managing is the issue of drink driving, and they have unveiled a fresh package of measures to combat drink driving. If you're under 20, you will soon be having a 0 alcohol limit imposed on you. However, the big debate over adult drivers has led the government to a status quo situation for the time being. Did they wimp out? Garry?
I think they did, and quite frankly, I was surprised by that decision. I thought all the signals were there. They were ready to take the action that I thought they needed to take. And I was truly surprised. I can't quite understand it. I don't know whether they've had some feedback in there somewhere which says Middle New Zealand might not be so happy about it. But I think as a country we have an alcohol issue. I think if ever there was going to be a signal sent, this was a chance to do it, bring us in line with Australia. No one really argues about it in Australia, saying let's lift the limit. We are out of step, and when you listen to people who've been through some of the exercises, there's two pieces to this. One is people can actually drink a lot more than they probably realise and still be below 0.05. And secondly, when you get to 0.08, it is difficult to drive a motor car under total control, and there's been exercises that prove that. So I would have said they should have taken the brave pill and done it.
Did they get it right or wrong?
Oh, I mean, I think the last government did some pretty brave things in terms of the same sort of area would, in terms of smoking in pubs and those sorts of things. And I think everybody goes, gee, they were actually really good initiatives. And I do look to my leaders to be leaders. And I don't think they are being leaders here. I think New Zealand has a really serious alcohol issue. I am completely incapable of driving a car at this 0.8 level. I'm not capable of driving a car safely at the 0.5 level. You know, we talk about only 14 deaths or something like that. I think that's an outrageous number. But also, if we have fewer people in our hospitals through all the other alcohol-related things, it's not just fewer alcohol people in hospitals. Those hospital beds are freed up for other people that we can do some genuine good. You know, I think John Key should have been willing to have the discussion at the ED department of a major New Zealand hospital on a Friday or a Saturday night with all the horrible drunk people behind them. That's the right environment to be having those sorts of discussions.
Perhaps one of the most uncomfortable ministers in the mix over this whole matter is the Transport Minister, Stephen Joyce, who clearly believed it was ridiculous, the limit. To quote him from 18 months ago, dear oh dear, he got rolled in Cabinet, clearly, eh?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's an absolute tragedy that they've backed down. I think the reality is that if you want to target the alcohol culture that we do have a problem with in New Zealand, you can't just keep targeting young people as being the problem. It's actually a lot wider than that, and I think it's absolutely appalling that he's done a flip-flop and that they haven't gone to reduce the limit. Now, I unfortunately never had the opportunity to do one of the tests where the police invite you in, you drink as much as you can to get up to the limit and see how you can drive. But from everything I've read, everything I've seen, it makes a hell of a lot of sense to reduce it from 0.8 to 0.5. And I think that would have been much more effective than reducing the zero limit, bringing in the zero limit for people under 20. So it's a shame.
Do you support the zero limit for the under 20s, Jan?
I didn't. I actually would support the 0.5 across the board. I think we want people to grow up and drink responsibly, and I think setting a clear boundary at 0.5 is the right thing to do across anyone that's drinking. There's a lot of young people, 18, 19, 20, that actually work in the hospitality sector. Often they'll have a staffy after work. They're now no longer allowed to. I think that's crazy.
There is a glaring double standard being set here, eh? We're saying to the youngies, you can't have a drop, yet for the adult driver, have 5 over 2 hours, you should be okay under our existing limit. That seems to be the case for a lot of our approaches to alcohol in this country. The adults will be fine, the youngies, we can't trust them. Is that the part of the problem here with our whole culture? The message is adults.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have the drinking age at 18 for a start, so I'm kind of hard having this conversation.
Yeah.
Young people don't drive as well as people with some more experience. It does affect them more. I think they know their bodies less well. Yeah. I think it's much easier to have a blanket rule. You just have a blanket rule. You're under 20, you can't drink, have a nice day. And I just think that's the harshness of life.
Okay. We'll take a break, plenty more to come. We'll have a look at some local body issues as well with our guests. Do stay with us.